Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zeng here, and welcome back to Week 8 of the WBE. Of course, I'm the coach of the Melbourne Rotoms, and this week we're up against Kyle A, the coach of the Miami Donphans. It's obviously been quite a roller coaster season here in the WBE. We've had some really great wins against some really incredible opponents, but also some of the toughest losses I've had in Draft League, singles, and in Pokemon in general. But it's all about the learning experience. I know I'm not very good at Draft League. I know this is not my forte, obviously, compared to VGC. But I appreciate all of those for continuing to support me and for watching the videos. Obviously, last week was quite the embarrassing loss, but it's definitely about the learning process. And I do really appreciate all of those who do continue and support the non-VGC content that I do. I joined these draft leagues to really try to, just be better at them, get as much experience as possible because I want to play them more going into the next generation. And I certainly can say I've been learning a lot. Probably not improving as quickly as I'd want to, but I think draft leagues do take a fair amount of commitment. And, if you want to be good at these, not only do you have to be a good player, you also have to put in the time. So I've been learning a lot, and obviously I haven't been doing as well as I'd like this season, but overall, 3 and 4 isn't the worst. It's still definitely possible to make the playoffs, and my goal with Draft League is always to at least go 500 or above, so definitely still possible to do that. Anyway, this week we're up against Kyle A, and he had a pretty scary team because he had Cresselia, which is one of the bulkier Pokemon you can go up against in Draft League, and then he had a bunch of weather users, so Torkoal plus the Victreebel, and then Pelipper plus the Kingdra. I thought both were pretty decent against my team, so I wasn't sure which one he actually wanted to go for this week, but I thought both were pretty scary. I want to credit my front office because they basically built the entire team for me this week. I didn't really have much time to think about Draft League or think about the team, and they came through with a really cool team. It's, nothing too crazy. Life Orb Mammal with Ice Shard, it was AV Conkeldurr, and then lefties on 3 different things, the Miltank, the Rotom, and the Blissey. So kind of the goal in this week was basically to stall away with Stealth Rocks and Toxic, enough to the point where Mamoswine could kind of just sweep through everything. Mammal was really good in this matchup, especially if he wasn't running Scarf Nidoqueen or the Volcanion. It could really just kind of destroy everything. So I felt pretty good about the team. I thought the one thing that I was pretty worried about was Cresselia being able to just heal back up because my team was relatively slow. I didn't have any ways to just one-shot the Cresselia. A Kartana was the one thing we thought about bringing. Someone suggested a Banned Kartana set, which I really liked. But the thing about Banned Kartana is going into this week, it gets outsped by both the Victreebel and the Kingdra. If the weather is up, both of those can just one-shot it with a Hidden Power Fire or an Ice Beam, and Torkoal can just switch into Kartana very, very freely, so didn't feel too comfortable with that. So ended up going with the non-Kartana build, but there were a lot of things that I liked. So like I mentioned, the goal was to set up rocks, ideally knock out Cresselia as early as possible, but I figured that wouldn't be very doable because I felt like he would just keep switching it in and out, and get a Toxic on it ideally. If I can get a Toxic on early, then I can really go from there. The strategy obviously wasn't foolproof. It does fall victim to something like Rest Cresselia, but if he was running Rest, I figured this was a Calm Mind Slowbro, that Slowbro could actually maybe get a couple of Calm Minds and just actually sweep the game. So yeah, a bunch of different approaches to this game. Ultimately, goal was to get Toxic on things, get rocks up, and go from there. So without further ado, let's jump into the battle. Once again, thanks to the front office for building this team, and thank you to Kyle, who is flexible around my schedule. Go check him out in the description below. Definitely one of the nicest guys we have around in the community. So, I decided to lead with Blissey to try to prioritize, like I mentioned, the early Stealth Rocks as he goes with the Nidoqueen. I wasn't too worried about Nidoqueen. I figured he would be a special variant because that's what I'm used to, and he actually reveals Super Fang, so I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's a really bulky variant of Nidoqueen. And after the Super Fang, even if he has Focus Blast or Z Focus Blast, I actually still survived that with Blissey. So, wasn't too worried about that. Wanted to scout out for what he was going to go for this next turn. Decided to stay in with Blissey and just go for a Soft Boiled, but he actually reveals that he's physical with Superpower, and I was like, oh, that's so smart. So that was a really bad mistake on my end. I probably should have switched Blissey out into something like Slowbro. It's not like, physical Nidoqueen was that much of a surprise there, but it definitely caught me off guard. And that's not a great start to this game. I decided to bring in Mamoswine here, which can pressure the Nidoqueen out. We know he's not Choice Scarf, which is actually a really big reveal. And I figured Cresselia is going to come in here. I'm actually running Life Orb and Knockoff, so I figured this is a great time to just go for the Knockoff. If he has a normal item, then I'll be able to just get rid of that, and another Knockoff might actually just be able to KO him. But he actually reveals the Colbur Berry, which is a really, really nice reveal there. If he didn't have Colbur Berry, then I would have done more damage with Knockoff, and another one would have actually just been able to KO him. I don't want to stay with Mamoswine because I don't have a way to really knock it out, so I decided this is a good time to bring out the Miltank, maybe start getting a Toxic off for 2. So he actually goes for the Grass Knot. This is Sap Sipper Miltank, so I'm able to eat that up and get an attack increase, but I wasn't running Return this week, so unfortunately that actually doesn't end up doing anything. The Cresselia switches back out into the Nidoqueen, and this was a relatively obvious switch, but I still decided to go for the Toxic. I wanted to see what he wanted to do here, but in all honesty, yeah, he was almost always going to switch out there. So not the best move on my end there. If I had returned, probably would have gone for it outright there, but yeah, I obviously didn't. So now that I see as a physical Nidoqueen, I decided to go into the Slowbro. He does reveal the Toxic Spikes on Nidoqueen, so it's a pretty cool set. Obviously, he kind of chips away at things, but it's also able to get T-Spikes up, and I thought that was a really clever set on his end. But obviously, Slowbro is in a pretty good position. I figure I can maybe Calm Mind here, but I didn't want him just hard switching into something like Victreebel or Heliolisk and just one-shotting me with the Z move. So I decided to just go for some good damage here, as he actually just stays it and goes for another layer of Toxic Spikes. Psychic here. You know, this Slowbro doesn't have much investment, but still does a lot of good damage there, so can't be too upset about that. You know, Nidoqueen now is most certainly in KO range for most attacks from my team. So, this next turn I figure he's just going to stay in and go for a Super Feint. I'm like, okay, I mean, I could just go for... I could switch out to avoid the Super Feint because I don't want to take the damage with Slowbro, especially because I've already lost one of my walls in this game, but I figure getting a knockout here is worth it. He's probably going to switch in something like Heliolisk or the Victreebel here, but I can just switch out of there, and because I got my Rocks up, everything is taking damage from Rocks at this point, which is pretty good. So, Heliolisk comes in. Obviously, not the greatest sight to see, but I'm going to switch out the Slowbro here. He's probably going to go for a Thunderbolt, but of course, Grass Knot is certainly a possibility as well. Figure Rotom is by far the best switch in here. He does go for the Grass Knot, which I'm pretty happy about. Obviously, I didn't want to switch into Mamoswine there because of the threat of Grass Knot. So, that's actually perfect for us. You know, we get to bring Rotom in a very good position. He's almost forced to switch out the Heliolisk here. And that is exactly what he goes for. So Heliolisk swaps out, and in comes Torkoal. Here I actually decided just to Overheat because I wanted to get some pretty good damage off anything. He didn't have great switches into Overheat. You know, if he switches in Crest, I can just go for the Toxic the next turn. So it actually ends up being the Torkoal, and even from a non-boosted Rotom, like no special attack Calm, it still does so much damage with Overheat. So obviously that's a great sight to see. Here I know another Overheat won't knock him out, so I decided to just Volt Switch. I figured that, you know, Torkoal isn't that much of a threat. Getting it to 10% is obviously really good as well. And I decided to actually bring in Slowbro here. Yeah, I'm going to eat up the Toxic, but he's probably not going to go for a Solar Beam here. Actually goes for the Stealth Rock. So at this point, he's gotten both layers of Toxic Spikes and Rocks up. But I know that I do have Defog on Rotom, so I'm actually not too worried about that. I've also got the Heal Bell on the Miltank, and right now I actually don't want to give up the Rocks. So, I decide to switch out here, baiting of a potential Solar Beam, maybe even Z-Solar Beam. I go back out into Rotom because now I know Rotom can just Volt Switch to get a knockout. He does go for the nice move of Rapid Spin, though, which is obviously a little bit unfortunate. If he didn't Rapid Spin there, then if Torkoal comes back out and back in, then he'll get knocked out from the Stealth Rocks. But it's still not the worst case scenario there. I decided to just go for the Defog there. He's gotten rid of my hazards, so now I want to get rid of his, especially because Nidoqueen is down, so nothing else gets Toxic on my team. Unfortunately, I wasn't running Guts Conkeldurr. If I was, then I would have actually wanted to switch in Conkeldurr to eat up the Guts, or take advantage of the Toxic Spikes, but that wasn't the case. He decides to just Flamethrower there, though, which really doesn't do any damage, so pretty happy about that. I figure he's going to switch out this next turn, and that is exactly what he goes for, and he goes back out into Cresselia, so without Rocks now, obviously, it's a little bit harder to deal damage consistently across the board, and I do go for the Volt Switch. This is where I really wish I had something like Banded Cortana to come in and just go for, like, a, you know, Banded Night Slash or something like that. Unfortunately, not the case. Decided to bring in Miltank, though, and I figure that this is a pretty free opportunity to Toxic now. Nidoqueen's out of the way, so Toxic will be able to hit anything on his team, and nothing on his team wants to take a Toxic. So Cresselia comes in, eats up the Toxic, and I am pretty happy about that. He decides to go for the Safeguard, actually, but my Miltank was a pretty speedy variant, so I'm able to, you know, get the Toxic off before Cresselia moves. Although, I mean, Miltank is already naturally faster than Cresselia, but that's a really, really big win for us here. Here I decided to go for the Heal Bell. I figured I could go for his Seismic Toss, but I think, you know, I was like, he's probably going to go for his recovery move here anyway, so let's just get rid of the Toxic onto the Slowbro. He does reveal Moonlight, and I'm pretty happy about that, as well as Safeguard and Grass Knot, because I know now he's probably not like a Calm Mind Rest variant, which in retrospect actually really kind of destroys my team. So, getting the Toxic off against Cresselia there is really, really huge. He can't really stay in at this point. I figure that's the case, because obviously, you know, it can't do anything against this Miltank. So he does end up going for the switch out into the Volcanion. I decided to just Seismic Toss there because I figured you want to switch out, and getting, you know, free 50 damage on anything is pretty good here. So decide to switch out here. I want to scout out for a potential Z fighting move because I figure that it's actually pretty likely he might be running that, or like a Z fire move, and we actually do see a Z move, and it is the Fightinium Z. So very happy about that because Miltank is really essential in this matchup. Being able to blow a Z move here is obviously very, very good for us, especially a fighting Z move. So I've been pretty happy about how the game has played out, other than the first turn. I feel like that was just a really bad blunder, or the second turn, not switching out Blissey. Losing it so quickly was definitely a pretty big mistake, because having that coverage was pretty good against his entire team, but taking 31 damage from a fighting Z move is pretty good there, so obviously happy about that at least. So he actually ends up switching out here. I wasn't sure if he had any way to actually hit the Slowbro, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to recover here. If he does have a way to get the knockout, sure, that's fine. If not, then I am able to heal all the way back up. So he does end up bringing the Torkoal, and I go for the Slack Off here, being able to heal back so much damage. We've seen a lot of Torkoal's attacks here as well, Flamethrower, Rocks, and the Rapid Spin. So it's obviously not like Z Solar Beam as well. So at this point, I'm like, if I'm faster, maybe I can just win with Calm Mind at this point. So I actually decided to just go for a Calm Mind here with the Slowbro, see what the Torkoal wants to go for. In retrospect, getting the knockout here probably just would have been better, because if I knock out Torkoal, that means that Victreebel really is just a lot more useless throughout the course of this match. But instead, I decided to just go for a second Calm Mind here, as he brings in the Heliolisk. So obviously, Heliolisk is pretty scary, but if he's running Dry Skin, I've gotten 2 Calm Minds up. He's actually going to be taking a lot of damage every turn, and he can't crit the Slowbro as well. So I'm thinking maybe I can actually just Slack Off stall him out and sweep the game with this point with Slowbro. So he brings in Heliolisk, and I'm like, he's probably Specs, especially because he switched out on Rotom earlier, and he goes for the Thunderbolt, and I'm like, that looks like Specs damage. But this isn't too bad, actually. I'm able to heal back a pretty comfortable amount every turn. He's doing slightly more than the 50%, but he has solar power, right? So he is taking damage every turn. So at this point, I'm like, maybe I actually just keep healing him out, stall out the Heliolisk, and if I time it correctly, then I'll be able to heal all the way back up on the turn Thunderbolt happens, and he'll KO himself. So I'm at the point where I'm like, maybe Slowbro can actually just sweep this game for me. Stun turns are obviously getting stalled out as well here, so this is a pretty good position, obviously, with Slowbro. So he keeps clicking Thunderbolt, I keep staying in, and it's fine, right? I'm not falling below to a consistent point where I'm really scared, but he does get the paralysis, and obviously it's like pretty likely that he is going to get a paralysis if he keeps clicking Thunderbolt, but this was a little bit earlier than I had hoped, mainly because, I could have stalled out here, but at this point, if I get one full para with the Slowbro, I'm completely screwed, so I don't want to risk it anymore. I decide to switch out into a Mamoswine. I know he's going to be clicking Thunderbolt here, so pretty safe play to go for. So, I mean, the bright side is that Salazzo is chipped away at this point, right? Like, Priority Ice Shard or Mach Punch most certainly will knock it out, but the paralysis is definitely a little bit unfortunate. He brings in Crest here, which was a pretty obvious play. At that point, I still wasn't sure if he was Specs or not. I was like, maybe he has like an Electric Plate or something to boost the Thunderbolt damage. So I wasn't entirely confident with the item that he had. I mean, he probably was, so in retrospect, I think like knockoffing there was probably safer, but I figured it didn't end up mattering because if Crest comes in, he's just going to be able to heal all the way back up anyway. So I decided this is a good time to bring in Rotom, and he actually reveals his last attack on Crest, which is pretty big, right? He's got Moonblast and Grass Knot, so he clearly has no way to really do anything against the Miltank, so that's one of my win cons against this Cresselia late game. So bring in Rotom, the Crest takes some more chip damage from the poison, and now I have the opportunity to just go for really anything I want with the Rotom. It's going to be Volt Switch or Defog, as the Torkoal does come in for a third time. I feel like I've got pretty good control of this game at this point, though. I'm chipping away at everything. I'm doing pretty good damage against everything. But I ended up going for the Defog, and I do think that I should have prioritized knocking out Torkoal sooner. A Volt Switch there obviously would have gotten rid of the knockout. Would have gotten rid of the Sun as well. And as you guys probably have noticed at this point, the Sun has actually been lasting for 8 turns, so it was Heat Rock Torkoal, and I actually didn't pay very good attention to that, which was my bad. So I wasn't prioritizing knocking out the Torkoal. Here I decided to go for the Volt Switch. He actually switches in the Volcanion, which I was so shocked to see, but obviously was very happy about that, because I'm able to do so much damage there, enough where a Mach Punch or an Ice Shard should be able to pick up the knockout now. And I actually have so many different options that I can switch into, but I decided to go for the Miltank because I know I'm faster than him because this is a pretty speedy Miltank. So get a free Body Slam here, or sorry, Seismic Toss here off against anything. He decides to just stay in, sack the Volcanion, and I'll definitely take that. That's definitely one of the bigger threats to the Mamoswine out of the way because Under the Sun, it really put in a lot of work. So he brings in Victreebel, and at this point I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm in a really, really good spot, but he actually revealed Swords Dance, which I was shocked by. My goal here was to actually stall out the Sun, thinking he just goes for an attack, and I decided to go for the Miltank, but that doesn't pay off. So at this point, I'm like, oh man, Swords Dance, like, how do I beat this? And what I was thinking, there are 2 ways here. I could stall him out here, stall out the Sun, and then Mamoswine will be able to just come in, outspeed, and get the knockout with something like a Life Orb Earthquake. But as I mentioned earlier, I actually wasn't counting the Sun turns very well. And I figured, I mean, like, okay, he doesn't have a way to heal back, right? So as long as I get this chip damage off, I should be able to get the knockout. But he actually reveals Leech Life as well, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, did I just lose this game? Like, does Victreebel just sweep me now? Because, you know, I said earlier I was playing for the Earthquake kind of win con with the Sun out of the way, but instead, yeah, he's able to kind of just sweep through everything now. He's at +4 with Victreebel, and I don't have too much I can take attacks from him. He goes for a Power Whip here, which was kind of surprising. It makes me think if he's running Power Whip, Leech Life, Swords Dance, maybe his last attack is Hidden Power Fire, so I wasn't too sure about that. But I've obviously lost 2 Pokemon already at this point, so I'm kind of forced to bring in the Conkeldurr, but the Sun is about to expire. So the goal here was, you know, Mach Punch him. He'll go for something like a Power Whip. I actually get the Avoid there, and I thought it was fine because I thought if he connects there, I get the free switch into Mammo, and Mamoswine can kind of just sweep the game at this point. I decided to go for another Mach Punch just to chip away as much as possible. He goes for another Power Whip and misses, so definitely very unfortunate on his end. And here I was like, okay, surely he goes for a Power Whip again. I got the free switch to Mammo, and now Mammo should be able to clean up this game. But he actually reveals, or he goes for the Leech Life there, which I was kind of surprised about. I decided to actually not go for the Mach Punch this turn, decided to go for a knockoff in case he Leech Life or missed yet another Power Whip. And I actually revealed a Yache Berry, which is a really big deal on Victreebel because it meant that he could actually have taken a Life Orb Ice Shard from the Mamoswine. So, quite frankly, I wasn't well prepared enough for the Victreebel, but he missed a couple of critical Power Whips there. So, this Conkeldurr was able to 1v1 it in a world that it really shouldn't have been able to. Like, obviously it was bulky, but I don't think it was taking a +4 Power Whip from that Victreebel. But the Earthquake chips away at enough where now Mamoswine most certainly will be able to knock out everything. The switching here to Cresselia is relatively obvious, and I really wish I capitalized by going for a knockoff, which I did have on Conkeldurr, but to be honest, it doesn't make much of a difference because he's able to heal back anyway the following turn, and knockoff isn't getting a knockout. So the Yache Berry and the Colbur Berry really smart rings on Kyle's end. So you know, I was kind of in panic mode, and I was thinking I would be okay because I figured that the Mamoswine would be able to deal with everything on his team, but I wasn't expecting the Yache Berry, so I think I might have actually got him bailed out by the misses there from Power Whip, which I felt really bad about because he came up with a really cool Victreebel set that really should have swept through my entire team. But, you know, obviously the game isn't over at this point. We obviously had a couple of rough turns, but now I'm like, okay, let's just focus on winning the game, what's in front of us. So, you know, with Cress against Miltank, Miltank's going to win this all the time because I've got the Toxic Stall, and he obviously doesn't have any real ways of dealing with me right now. So, obviously, that is pretty good, and everything on his team is chunked down, you know, consistently to the point now where Mamoswine should be able to just win this game. The chain of events, once again, with Victreebel was pretty unfortunate. I figured if he didn't have Yache Berry, Mamoswine would still be able to win, but the fact is, like, he did have the Yache Berry. He would have still needed to hit a Power Whip, obviously, on the Mammo, because I'm not sure +4 Leech Life gets the knockout. But obviously, actually, it probably does. Yeah, so I think if he gets the Power Whips, I'm probably lose. I mean, I would have been able to bring in Mamoswine for free, and I wouldn't have had to click Ice Shard there, but he probably just brings in the Torkoal to sack it off. But at this point, everything is so heavily damaged on his end that Torkoal will be able to, like, or I will be able to sweep through his entire team, basically, at this point. So, go for the Seismic Toss. That gets the knockout onto Torkoal. That's great. And even though right now it doesn't reflect it, when we were playing this game live, it actually, like, it came so close to timer. I think at this point there were only, like, 5 or 6 minutes left in the game. And I was like, either of us could potentially win from timer, and I'm honestly not sure who would. So he brings in the Salazzle, or not the Salazzle, sorry, the Heliolisk, and I'm like, oh, does he have, like, Specs Focus Blast? So I switch out worrying about the Focus Blast. I figure, okay, I can sack the Mamoswine here to get the free switch into the, or sack Conkeldurr here to get the free switch into Mamoswine. He goes for the Hyper Voice, so I'm thinking at this point he probably is Specs. I should have known that from earlier damage output against the Slowbro, but now I can just bring in Mamoswine and everything is in KO range from Mammo. So, you know, he's at like 10% with this, the Cresselia and the Victreebel. So he brings in Cress here, but I actually think it might have been better on his end to sack the Heliolisk for free, because I will be able to just knock out the Cresselia with Life Orb Ice Shard and knock off after toxic damage. So if he sacks in the Heliolisk, then Cresselia can actually come in and eat up a knockoff with Life Orb potentially. and go for something like a Moonlight. So that was actually a really, really big opportunity as well. But I figured that the Victreebel, Miltank would be able to win against Crest 1v1. It's just like we didn't have enough time at this point. Like, I think by this point, there was only like a minute left in the game. And I didn't want a timer stall. I didn't know if he wanted to do it. So I was like, because it could go both ways. But Mamla ends up clutching it out. It gets 3 knockouts. And we end up getting the win in a really, really intense game. Actually, the game isn't over yet. He still has Heliolisk here. But yeah, just click eye shot and everything. And like I mentioned, that was kind of what we were setting ourselves up for with this Mamoswine. But there were a lot of critical mistakes in this game. And like I mentioned, so let's say he hits that Power Whip. After I do the Mach Punch damage, I bring in Mamoswine, and what I was thinking was, okay, Mammal just wins this, right? Because even if you're forced to switch out Victreebel into Torkoal, you sack away the Torkoal, I get the knockout there, then you bring in something, probably like the Victreebel again. I was like, okay, I could just Ice Shard to knock you out. But in retrospect, because you had the Yache Berry, my endgame game plan wasn't like 100% foolproof. So to be honest, I actually do think I should have lost this, and that's really telling. Because I thought I played well for like 80% of the match, but the 20% I didn't play well in, they were like really, really critical turns. So, you know, a couple of the key turns that I do want to talk about. Losing Blissey the way I did was very bad because Blissey was such a good switch-in into so many of his Pokemon. I really should have prioritized knocking out Torkoal sooner than later. As I mentioned, I wasn't counting the Sun turns properly when I played against Kyle, and I was expecting the Sun to expire when it was Miltank against the Victreebel. And I was like, oh, Swords Dance, it's fine. I'll outspeed you after the Sun's over. I'll be able to get some Seismic Tosses off. You know, I can bring in Mamoswine. We're fine. And that's completely on my end, because he had already brought in Torkoal for 2 points at that point in the game, so there's no excuse there. And for that reason, I should have noticed that the Sun was lasting longer, and for that reason, I should have prioritized knocking out Torkoal sooner. Like, there were 2 points. I mean, Torkoal was brought down to 10% immediately in this game, and then it just wasn't knocked out, allowing him to get Sun up at 3 different points in this game. So that was a really, really critical error. Otherwise, I mean, there were some points where I could have made some better predictions, but overall, you know, Yache Victreebel was such a smart brain. The upside was he obviously couldn't have really done too much against Miltank other than Leech Life, and I'm actually not sure a +4 Leech Life from him would have knocked me out. But at the point, I was really worried about Poison Jab as well. Although, thinking about it more, like after I was reflecting on after the game, I was like, he probably has Hidden Power Fire because otherwise he can't touch the Kartana, so HP Fire would have made a lot more sense. But during the course of the match, I was like, oh man, like how do I deal with this Victreebel? So the Power Whip misses were definitely unfortunate. Like at the time, I was like, oh, I don't think they end up mattering because I think Mamoswine just wins this anyway. But because he had the Yache Berry, I think it actually did end up mattering, which I definitely feel bad about. So apologies to Kyle there. I mean, it's part of the game, obviously, and Power Whip isn't the most accurate move at 85%, but it's still obviously a big enough deal where it definitely did matter. So, yeah, I feel bad about that, and I mean, these are the games where it's like you win by RNG, I think, and you look back and you're like, wow, like I could have been in a position where I didn't need the RNG at all because I felt like I had full control of this game, and if he wasn't Swords Dance Victreebel, like, I, you know, kind of just sweep through him because Victreebel can't do anything. But because he was, and that was in a set, that was not a set that I considered, what I really needed to do properly was to check the Torkoal sooner so that the Mamoswine just sweeps through and, you know, beats the Victreebel outside of the Sun, because Earthquake will actually just be able to do enough to really destroy it. So, yeah. Really, really careless play on my end to not knock out the Torkoal. I think that was the #1 critical mistake, and I just kind of underestimated Victreebel. I was like, even in the Sun, you know, Sun only lasts for a couple of turns, you only get so much mileage off it. I should be able to stall out the Sun without much problem, but the Swords Dance physical set was such a smart brain, one that I really did not anticipate, and one that definitely could have swept through my entire team. So, as is the case with last week, I mean, I think a lot of these games come down to not expecting certain sets, and that's, you know, it's tough as a VGC player because it's hard to kind of see into what some of these Pokemon will do. A lot of times I'll just go on Smogon and be like, oh, this is the #1 set. You'll bring something similar to this. But in Draft League, obviously, that's not the case. And I thought Kyle came up with a really, really smart Victreebel set. I thought the Nidoqueen was really cool as well. And it is really on me to not have knocked out Torkoal earlier. Because I think if I knocked out Torkoal, like, you know, for example, the turn where I defogged when Cresselia switched out, like, if I just Volt Switch there, would have been able to knock out the Torkoal, Sun would have expired afterwards, he wouldn't have been able to reset it, and then Mamoswine just wins the game. So, in my head, I was like, I don't even need to care about the Torkoal because I should be fine, but that obviously was not the case. So, definitely some lessons learned against weather. Always have to be paying attention to how long it's lasting. Really should be jotting it down. And the game was, like, so intense, like, it was like a 58-minute battle, so wasn't really even paying very good attention to that throughout the course of it. So, that's completely on me. Losing Blissey was bad. I think, yeah, I probably should have switched out into Slowbro, but, you know, Was worried, I guess, about like a Life Orb Thunderbolt set from the Nido Queen, but I think with the bulk, yeah, what I was worried about was like switching into a Super Fang basically, and then eating up a Thunderbolt. But in that position, Nido Queen's probably clicking something like a Fighting Attack there, or an Earth Power. He's probably not going to Super Fang the Blissey. So yeah, I think switching into Slowbro turn 2 would have been good. Even into Rotom, for example, like there were a lot of options there, and I ended up not going for any of them. So 2 critical mistakes this game, not losing or giving up Blissey as quickly as I did, and not checking out the Torkoal, or not knocking out the Torkoal as quickly as I should have. Because, like, think about earlier on in the match where it was Rotom against the Torkoal and I Volt Switched. Could have even gone for an Overheat there instead of Volt Switching, just because then another Overheat would have knocked him out. I don't mind Volt Switching there, but yeah, I just think I should have really knocked out Torkoal sooner than later. He conserved it well, and it was my bad not to have knocked it out, because obviously you saw the repercussions from it. So I really was not too happy about this win, because at first I was like, oh, the RNG probably didn't matter, and then I saw the Yache Berry, I was like, nope, I think it did. And feel bad because Kyle played really well. At the end of the day, he obviously would have needed to hit some Power Whips to win this game, and in the end he didn't, but the odds were in his favor, and you never want to come out of a win being like, yeah, if I didn't get that luck, then I wouldn't have won. So yeah, I've been talking about this for a while, but ultimately a really good game to Kyle. It was definitely one of the most intense matches I've played in a while. Mamoswine cleaned up in the end, but it could have played out very differently, and I think my play was not too great in this one, so hopefully we'll be able to play a little bit better. Obviously a win is a win, so we take those, but still a lot to improve on, and made some bad mistakes this match. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to the front office for building this team. It really played out phenomenally. I should have played it a lot better. And ultimately, I think I just need to come into these weeks a little better prepared, because I certainly underestimated Victreebel this week. I underestimated Miss Mages last week, so a lot of key errors there. And thank you to you guys for watching. Go check out Kyle. He's linked in the description below. Leave a like if you enjoyed. We're 4-4 now, so we're still on pace to maybe meet the 500 record. I think there's 13 weeks in the league, right? So it's 4-4 right now. I think if we finish 7-6, there's a decent chance we make the playoffs. It might come down to battle differential at that point. If we go 8-5, we most certainly will, but we've still got some really tough games coming up. We have Gator and Leo in the last couple of weeks, and they're 2 of the best players in this league, so it's going to be hard to beat them, and can't underestimate anyone in this league. That's going to be it for this one, guys, though. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Go check out Kyle, and I'll see you guys soon. Alright, peace.